Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways. Action stations, all hands on deck. Welcome to part 3, Boxing Day, of our Sink the Scharnhorst series. We didn't call
mini-series.
We didn't call it that to start with, Sink the Scharnhorst, because we wanted it to have an element of a cliffhanger. But I mean, we do expect the We Have Ways listener to know that the Scharnhorst ends up at the bottom, don't we, Jim? Let's be honest now. You're not.
I think so. I mean, we're still calling it the Battle of the North Cape, though.
We are still calling it the Battle of the North Cape.
So there might be a few surprised amongst you to realise that it...
Yeah, absolutely. But let's start with this. It all seemed so strange. There was this terrific ship loved by her crew as Jamaica is by us. All the extra bits of paint here and there, Christmas decorations in the messes, a complete self-contained unit, a town with its own life, a fine, proud, living thing. And then it just wasn't. And we piped port watch of the hands to defence stations, clear up the mess decks, and hats for rounds, and had picnics in the gun room on ham for Makiyeri, and turned in. We had done something that had altered the whole course of the Home Fleet's war, and yet, besides a lot of laughter and line shooting, nothing happened. It seemed difficult to grasp. We'd sunk something and then passed on. It all seemed too impersonal for proper thinking, whereas really, it was an intensely personal thing. They were jolly brave, anyhow.
Yeah.
Now
that's from the words of Peter Fleck.
So before we get into Sunday, the 26th of December, 1943, who's Peter Fleck, Jim?
So Peter Fleck is the father of a local friend of mine, Richard Fleck, who is a barrister. And I was talking to him on the 1st of January. Another friend of mine was organising a little shindig. And we were chatting around. And in the course, his family stories, because he's got lots of Dutch German Flecks,
right, of course,
in there as well, and so
he's Fleck from Hello,
all that, and he's got lots of sort of Dutch resistance heroes in his armory as well, and because they were Jewish, obviously then it wasn't one of those ones where part of the family were Nazi and part of them weren't. I mean, they were all very much anti.
Yeah.
He happened to be, we were talking about the Battle of the North Cape, and he said, "Oh, my father was in that. He was in Jamaica." I was like. The cruiser, not obviously in the Caribbean. And I just thought, oh, that's absolutely amazing. And then he said, yeah, and he wrote this amazing piece about it. And he said, and I said, well, any chance I could look at that? And he said, yeah, of course. So I trotted up there literally the next day and photographed it and read it. And it's wonderful. And so we're going to be following the fortunes of Peter a little bit.
Yes.
In the course of this episode, because he's very much our kind of human drama.
Yes, he's our eyes on the...
He's eyes on the water, so to speak. And so that's who Peter Fleck is. And he was a young midshipman assigned to, and he was on one of the guns. I think he was on X-turret on the cruiser HMS Jamaica, and was absolutely there in the very thick of it. Part of Force 2, which for those of you who've listened to the first 2 episodes will remember, is the battleship Duke of York.
The heavy metal, basically.
4 S-class destroyers and Jamaica the cruiser. And these are the big guns and commanded by the Commander-in-Chief of Home Fleet himself, Sir Bruce Fraser.
And Jamaica, for instance, is a unit. I mean, nothing. Obviously, in our last episode or the previous episode, I can't remember which, we got very much into the what's a battleship, what's a battle cruiser, what's a pocket battleship,
yes,
and so on, which are actually important distinctions. But the Jamaica's like is a Fiji class cruiser of the Royal Navy.
Yes,
we're talking 4 triple 6-inch guns, 4 twin 4-inch guns, 4 quadruple 2-pounder pom-pom anti-aircraft guns, Oerlikons, the whole lot. So this is no light vessel in itself. Laid down in 39, so cutting essentially right up to date piece of piece of kit doing what it's meant to be doing.
And I sent you this book, didn't I, on the Gunnery Pocket Book, 1945, which is a Royal Navy thing. And it's absolutely amazing because it has all these pullouts of these drawings of all the various classes of cruiser and destroyer and gun mountings anyway. And it's got a typical gunnery layout of a Mauritius class cruiser, which is not quite the same as a Fiji class, but is very, very similar. And it's got the same kind of main turret layout and everything. So you can see with Y turret and X turret at the back, there are 3 guns in each turret, B and A turret at the front, and various helicopters. I mean, just looking at it, it is absolutely rammed full of weaponry, isn't it?
Yes, and chock full of ammunition as well. So if your magazine
chock full of ammunition,
if your magazine goes up, you're in real trouble. What I like is just before that, though, Jim, in this book are the bugle calls, a list of bugle calls, action, alarm to arms, cruising stations. Well, it's all.
Darkened ship is really good.
Yeah, first post, last post, rouse, sunset.
So I can do it. I can read music. What about officers dressed for dinner?
Yes, officers dressed for dinner. Fantastic. Yes, look at that. Anyway.
Close watertight doors, which is... It's quite a boring one, that one.
It's another planet, the Navy. Let's put it that way. Anyway,
it's a different world, isn't it?
It's a different world.
But list of bugle calls. So there's 61. Yeah. And you better know them all.
Yeah, you better know them all. And some poor Marine who knows them all. Who, I mean, I know a couple of.
It's an essential piece of kit, that book. An essential piece of kit.
Incredible, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, we should do one session where we just go through that book.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, but it's not this episode because we are trying to sink.
It's not this episode. Come on, we got to get on with it. We're on Boxing Day. We can't keep that. We can't keep them hanging on that cliff any longer.
No, exactly. So, they've
either got to pull off or pulled up or jump off.
It's a full day though. This is the interesting thing about this. This action essentially begins at midnight and goes on all day.
0028.
0028. Bay, who's
you will remember is the Konter Admiral.
That's right. Who's commanding the German flotilla, the German Kampfgruppe. He receives a signal that Luftwaffe has lost contact with the convoy, so he's off to a good start. Had lost contact with the convoy at 16:25 the previous day. Luftwaffe don't say where the convoy was. I mean, this is all,
it's spectacularly unhelpful.
It's all pretty shoddy, isn't it? And then half an hour later, he gets another signal that says that it was the last sighting. Oh no, actually, it was 3:10 yesterday.
That's even worse.
It's even worse. Meanwhile, Force One at 1 o'clock. Force
One, pretty damn good idea where they are.
Yeah,
the Germans
they alter course to 260 degrees, which is pretty much going
west.
Yeah, just shy of due west.
So just to remind people, Force 1 is coming from Russia. Force 2 is coming from Iceland.
So
the idea is that they're going to try and sandwich it in the middle. So Konter Admiral Bay on the Scharnhorst with his 5 Zerstörer
and his 40 cadets,
his destroyers, are heading kind of sort of pretty much northwards, not entirely northwards, but they're heading straight towards the convoy. JW55B, which is heading on a course of about 070, isn't it? Something like that. So heading northeasterly. Part
of this is that these are quite confined waters, and so what the Royal Navy are doing here, what Fraser's doing here, is taking advantage of that, isn't he? He knows that
it works against us. It works for us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's worked against the Navy pretty much. When things have gone wrong, so PQ-17, for instance, it's worked against the Navy. The fact that these waters are quite confined. Because PQ-17 disperse, don't they? Which might work, probably might work in the Atlantic, could work in the Atlantic because the Atlantic's so enormous. But here is a situation where there isn't really much room for manoeuvre. So what Fraser's doing is using that, isn't it? Is using the fact that you're trapped in here with us, we aren't trapped in here with you. It's sort of
and what he's trying to do is sandwich them in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. The Admiralty then receives a signal that the German battle group has sailed and passes that on at 0319 to Fraser.
So Fraser's now licking his lips.
Exactly.
He was right all along. He predicted they were going to come out.
Yes. I expect, though, Fraser's a chap who, it's a tiny smile in the corner of his mouth, isn't it? He's not.
Yes.
He's not high-fiving himself.
Yes, but it's the tiny smile tempered with anxiety that they're not going to be able to get there in time.
Yes, exactly. So he receives the message at 03:39. I mean, the other thing is I'm wondering when on earth he got any sleep.
You don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. That's for later.
He gets the message.
We've got a battleship, pocket battleship, battlecruiser to sing.
Yeah. But he's worried that if the Germans attack at first daylight, they'll retreat immediately. Force 2 isn't going to be able to help. So he's worried that it's not all quite going like clockwork. It's not quite clicking together.
Maybe you should just call it a pocket battleship cruiser.
I think that's.
And then you're covering all eventualities.
I think, or a cruising
pocket battleship.
A cruising pocket battleship. It's a pocket cruiser. Oh, whatever. At 4 in the morning.
Let's just call it the Scharnhorst.
Let's just call it that. Actually, is the simplest way.
It's
of
the
dealing
safest
with it,
of all, isn't it? Yeah.
So at 4 o'clock in the morning, 0400, RA-55A, which is the convoy sailing away from Russia, so the empty ships, is now 200 miles west of Bear Island. I was wondering about that after we spoke yesterday. Are those boats? Are they going quicker because they're empty, or are they handling worse in rough seas because they're empty? Because they're designed to have a certain amount of cargo.
Well, they're going into the wind, aren't they? So they shouldn't be going that much faster. I would have thought they would go faster because they're empty. There's no question about it.
But they might not handle as well because of ships are designed to handle with what they're drawing, aren't they? So if you've got an empty freighter, it probably doesn't handle as well as when it's loaded and it's sat in the sea properly. It's designed.
The bottom line is that the timings on this haven't worked, so that they're not in synchronicity as they come south of Bear Island. But the good news for RA-55A is it's 200 miles west of Bear Island, which basically means it's safe.
It's clear. Yeah.
It might have some U-boats, but the U-boats aren't very effective at this time. And it's still got plenty of escorts, even though 4 destroyers have been detached.
Have been peeled off. Yeah, that's right.
The 36th destroyer flotilla has been peeled off.
And RA-55A, they haven't been detected either, as far as the Navy knows. So it's clear that it's pretty clear the Germans are going for JW-55B, which is the convoy inbound for Russia. And they're 50 miles south of Bear Island at 8 knots on this course of 070 degrees. So basically, almost, northeast.
East-northeast.
East-northeast, that's it. East-northeast. Force 1 is steaming in, it's 150 miles east of the convoy, steaming in at 18 knots. So
Force 1 is coming from Russia. Force 2 is coming from Iceland.
Yeah, I think you said that, Jim.
Yeah, no, I think I said the other way around. But anyway, that's what I meant.
But see, this is why neither of us are admirals of the home fleet.
But sir, we're in this.
But sir, we're Force 2. Oh, bloody hell, not again.
You sure you want us to go to the Azores?
Just call it the Scharnhorst.
I need my non-map maps.
They're charts. Oh, God, we can't call them maps.
Charts. Okay.
Whoa, God, that was close. The convoy's doing what it can to remain coherent, so it's toddling along at 8 knots. Everyone else is doing what they can to get there sooner, but I think one of the interesting things is the weather. Again, the weather is really, 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 really bad. So even the Duke of York, which basically is a whole lot of ship and can power on through pretty much any kind of ocean, even the Duke of York's having a problem. Well, they're doing 24 knots. And they would probably be doing, I don't know, another 5 or 6. Were the weather better, but they can't.
And at 4:01, Fraser issues orders to Captain McCoy. And you may remember that Captain McCoy is the man in charge of the fighting destroyer escort of the convoy JW-55B, which is going to Russia. And he says, and so what you're getting now is that Fraser's on the scene. He may still be kind of 300 miles away, 350 miles away, but he's very much now he is running the show. He's the admiral. He's the commander-in-chief of Home Fleet. He's on it. And he's saying to McCoy, basically, turn north as quickly as possible. Get as far away from the Scharnhorst and the German destroyers as you possibly can, as quickly as you possibly can. 4:10 at 04:10, midshipman Peter Fleck, still only 19, on board HMS Jamaica, wakes up and goes to the cipher office. So, as we all know, you do these watches when you're on a ship. So, it's 24 hours, not 12 hours. And So he wakes up at 0410, goes up to Cipher office, and he sees just one message, which is C in CHF, Home Fleet, CS10, which is Cruiser 10, which is Force 1, D17, which is the destroyers, so that's Captain McCoy, from Admiralty. Admiralty appreciates Scharnhorst is at sea. So this is the message that...
Appreciates. I absolutely love that as a word for this for this piece of information. We appreciate that the Scharnhorst is at sea because it doesn't say they know. It doesn't say they're certain.
Yeah.
It doesn't say they guess. They appreciate that they're at sea.
It says they're rubbing their hands together at the prospect of a big scrap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're very appreciative.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, and I thought this was a lovely detail, so Peter Fleck notices that the writing after the word Scharnhorst, i.e. is at sea, is all shaky from the writer's excitement when he's noted it down.
Isn't that incredible?
And he goes back and says, look, this is all exciting, and no one seems to know anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's funny in itself.
And he takes the forenoon watch, which for everyone else means morning.
I mean, he's 19, so I mean, he'll know exactly what the Scharnhorst is. He'll know that it's a pocket battleship cruiser battleship, won't he? He'll know exactly what he'll know exactly what's going on.
Cruiser, yeah,
exactly. He'll know exactly what's going on here. Okay, and then 0546, Burnett.
Vice Admiral Burnett, his flag is the Belfast.
Replies giving his position. The sea's now extremely rough, so winds force 7 to 8. I mean, that's the other thing is that this all happens in the day. It's a foul day, and they still manage to press this home. I think it's quite interesting. By 6 o'clock, the weather's improving slightly, but if you're improving slightly from a force 7 to 8, it's still bad. 36 Destroyer Division now begins sweeping starboard on the starboard side of the convoy to make use 716 dive, because there are U-boats in contact with the convoy, but they're not doing anything. They're not really.
This is Wolfpack Eisenberg.
Then at 0628, Fraser orders the convoy to steer a course of 0445 degrees, so northeast, for Force 1 to close on the convoy as soon as possible. So he's trying to like tidy up his lines, essentially, isn't he?
Well, and also he wants to make sure that even if he's not there before the Scharnhorst gets on the scene, at least Force 1 will be. So things are really starting to pick up suddenly.
And a sign of the fact that they're picking up suddenly is that at 0700 HMS Belfast is brought to first degree readiness, so he's ready to rock and roll.
Bay, at the same time,
yes,
Conti Admiral Bay,
he sends his Zestorers out. So Z28. I mean, honestly, the Germans aren't good at this. They need to give the destroyer Z29, Z30. I mean, it's not good, is it? These destroyers.
Awful names. So the 5 destroyers head off, and at this point, the Scharnhorst reduces speed to a mere 10 knots. I mean, what the heck?
The weather's really, really bad. I mean, it's partly.
Yes, I know, but this is something that's capable of doing nearly 32 knots.
Yeah, but
what is he thinking?
Well, he
must know that the longer he's out at sea, the greater the chance of being intercepted by the Royal Navy.
Last episode, we talked about how maybe that order he sends to his boss, to Schneivind, where he says, where it feels like he's saying, look, if there's any way I could possibly get out of this, please let me know. Do you think he's doing that a little?
Well, actually, I think you may well be right, because maybe if he sends his destroyers ahead, they're sweeping for kind of any evidence. And basically, the destroyers then see the Duke of York or Belfast and the cruiser squadron and go, do you know what? We should just turn around here, send it back. And he goes, well, I'm sufficiently far back now because I've reduced my speed to 10 knots that I've got an escape route.
You see, I think there's.
Do you think that's what's going on?
I think there's a tiny bit of that going on. Yeah, and I don't blame him.
No. Meanwhile, Fraser is going all guns.
Yeah, exactly. Force 1 changes course to 270 degrees. So again, due west. So, exactly. And it's steaming with the wind. So they're cracking on 7:30. Bay thinks he's 40 miles southeast of Bear Island. And that shows actually that even though earlier on we were talking about, he's a couple of 100 miles away, they're 50 miles away, they're 150 miles away. The speeds these ships are going, they're covering the distance. If he's 40 miles southeast of Bear Island, when he was 200 miles only an hour and a half ago.
Well, it's not like going around the M25, is it? Let's face it. I mean, you got no roundabouts, traffic lights or anything. You can just draw a straight line and go there, can't you?
You've got very bad weather, though.
Yeah, that's true.
And then he orders the crew of the Scharnhorst to action station. So So, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? That within half an hour of each other, both Belfast and Scharnhorst have realised that things are kicking off. 0740, Force One receives a new location for the convoy for JW55B.
So it's absolutely in touch, knows what it's got to do, where it's got to be.
Yeah, the sort of that anxiety Fraser must have felt it must be subsiding a little at this point. That they've managed to make up for the lost time and coordinate properly. 0755, Scharnhorst signals an alteration of course to 230 degrees.
In other words, it's turning around to go. It's going southwest at this point, and you can see the 5 destroyers. They're all turning southwest to completely the opposite direction to JW55B. The 36th Division is now peeled off and is coming towards them as well.
Yeah.
Force One is coming from the southeast.
Yeah. Well, and
Scharnhorst is behind Z29, which is in the middle of the 5 destroyers.
Well, and if the idea is that the destroyers offer other targets as well as the Scharnhorst in order to protect the Scharnhorst, that at 0840, by 0940, which we'll talk about in a minute, they're not doing that, are they? They are not. Well, offering a screen at all.
No, but they're looking for JW55B, which is to the north of them, and moving in the opposite direction. So they're just patrolling the wrong area. That's the bottom line. He's
got it wrong, isn't he? That's the thing. Bay is
well, and the key thing is at 0800, the 36th Destroyer Division completes its sweep and forces U716 to dive, but then the U-boat then resurfaces and makes a sighting report. And at this point, Scharnhorst then alters course again.
Crucially, all comms between the Scharnhorst and the destroyers ceased. So he's on his own. I do think Bay did this in order to try and avoid a confrontation, perhaps. That misstep is the thing that serves him up into Fraser's trap, really.
Yeah. So it's gathering pace, isn't it? And 0820, Peter Fleck on board HMS Jamaica. Here's the commander, who's Captain John Hughes Hallett. And he announces over the tannoy that the Scharnhorst is at sea and that the ship would go to action stations in 5 minutes' time. And in the end of it, they end up being closed up which means, absolutely on first alert for 12 hours, 25 minutes. And he talks about it's not cold in X-turret, but they get an exaggerating feel for the role of the ship. This mighty cruiser, but still kind of, just imagine, can't you?
You can actually. In response to our first episode, one of our listeners after the first episode, Paul Kemp, wrote in and said, Vice Admiral Sir Frederick Parham, who's on Belfast, told me that North Cape was like being locked in a darkened fridge, which was being violently shaken.
Wow, that's very vivid. Well, I think we should take a break there, and then because the Scharnhorst has been detected, and then we can get into some action.
And find out what happens next after the break. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. The Scharnhorst has been detected. It's 8:30 in the morning. On Sunday, the 26th of December, Boxing Day, 1943, Sheffield comes to first-degree readiness. Sheffield is a cruiser. There's no dispute about that. At 0834, Norfolk, on its Type 273 radar, picks up Scharnhorst.
Yeah, there's 2 types of radar these cruisers have. Yeah. They have the Type 284 and the Type 273.
Picks her up at a bearing of 280 degrees, 18.75 miles away, which is not very far away.
33,000 yards.
Yeah, which is one of the things they tell you on when you go to Belfast, they say these guns you could fire onto Heathrow from here in the centre of London with these guns, right? 18.75 miles is close in this money, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, and you're starting to get to the point, but don't forget it's dark. We've only just gone past the shortest day. High up in the Arctic, it's literally dark pretty much all day. It's certainly dark at this time of night. So the key is to get close enough to be able to fire star shells over the enemy ship and illuminate so that you can see what you're doing. Yeah. British gunnery is sufficiently skilled that it can do it without being illuminated. It can do it by radar and gun laying and all the rest of it, and rangers. But it's much better to have the illumination. But what you're sensing is gathering pace here, that things are about to happen.
Well, then Belfast picks her up at 35,000 yards and locks her guns onto Scharnhorst. McCoy with the convoy is told by Burnett on Belfast that this has happened, that the contact's happening. Sheffield then makes contact. So 3 of the big beasts have found the Scharnhorst on radar, 17.3 miles away.
So it's getting closer.
It's getting closer. And that's at 10 to 9. At 5 to 9, 0855, Kapitän Johansson on Zestora 29 sends a convoy site reporting. I mean, it's no good, isn't it? And he orders 29 to prepare to fire at this target. And they almost immediately realise that it's actually another one of their destroyers out of position to the north. So they're not having any. The German destroyer flotilla is not having any luck, basically. They're out of touch with the Scharnhorst, and they don't know. They're all like, they don't know who's who in their own formation, so they're having a rough time of it.
And there's no question about it. The Force One is scenting blood.
Exactly.
The three big cruisers, they're absolutely mad for it.
Just in case anyone was wondering about what the Soviets are up to at this point, Admiral Golovko orders 3 Soviet subs to the area of the North Cape, so we can all breathe a sigh of relief that the Soviet Navy has finally shown up, or is going to show up. 9 o'clock. So at 9 o'clock, we actually, I think you've in the notes you've written first action, Jim. So here we go. 9 o'clock, Belfast picks up a radar echo at 13.9 miles away, bears the guns, the 6-inch guns at 3 minutes later. The 3 cruisers are all now in line on a bearing of 180 degrees, coming in on the Scharnhorst. 0904, a minute later, the radar echo is down to 20,500 yards on a bearing
which
of
is about 11 miles.
So it's getting a lot closer. So it was 18 miles a minute ago, or half an hour ago. Captain McCoy receives a radar report that the Scharnhorst is on a bearing at 125 degrees to the convoy at 35 miles. So, I mean, the convoy is still very much bait.
So 125 degrees, that's now going east-southeast.
The Scharnhorst is doing handbrake turns while this is all happening. 0915, Force 1 alters course to 160 degrees with Belfast leading and retraining her 6-inch guns, followed by Sheffield and Norfolk. The Scharnhorst is now on a course of 070 degrees. So, I mean, he's
so I'm now looking at the chart.
Yeah.
The situation 0930 to 0914. What's really interesting is that you can see the 5 destroyers all in a row, all heading southwest away from everything else. The Scharnhorst is now pointing southeasterly. JW55B is still heading north. 36th Division, which is the destroyers, is between JW55B and the German destroyers and the Scharnhorst. And the Belfast, Sheffield and Norfolk of Force 1 are hot on the tails of the Scharnhorst. That's basically what's happening. 0924.
That's what it's all about. Up goes the Belfast, opens fire with the Star Shell. I mean, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, this? Because you said, you did say that the Royal Navy can do this with radar if they want. They don't need the Star Shell, but the Star Shell's better. But also the Star Shell, firing a Star Shell is a signal of intent, isn't it?
Damn right.
It's as much saying to the Scharnhorst, we can see you, isn't it?
Yeah.
As anything else. If part of how you go about this is to intimidate the enemy. The Norfolk then fires a Star Shell a minute later. And Onslow, one of the destroyers, sees the Star Shell. So basically, it's a signal to everybody, an immediate signal. You haven't got to radio anybody.
Yes,
up it goes.
And the other thing
the Scharnhorst no.
And the reason Norfolk doesn't fire initially, Belfast does, is because Belfast has got non-flashless cordite.
Yeah.
Oh no, has got flashless cordite. So basically, when you fire the Starlight, you can't see the gun winking from 10 miles away.
Yeah.
Which in turn tells the enemy where you are.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. So Norfolk, which has non-flashless cordite, in other words, it flashes, takes a punt.
Because Norfolk might as well.
Yes, but by doing so, Norfolk is illuminating itself in the process,
yes.
or giving a pretty big indication of where it is.
Where it
so
is.
That's not without risk. But these Star Shells are amazing because they hurtle up into the air. I mean, miles, and then they illuminate. They sprinkle. They basically cover the area with illumination, with light, as they drift very, very slowly on little parachutes, don't they? Or do they just twinkle? Maybe not on parachutes, but anyway, they cast a glow over the target.
Well, artificial daylight, isn't it?
Artificial daylight, yeah.
And then Sheffield fires 5 salvos of Star Shell at a range of 11,700 yards,
which is what 6 plus miles, isn't it?
Yeah, but enough of the illuminations. 0930, Norfolk fires 6 broadsides of HE. High explosive,
yes.
At a range of 9,800 yards. Blind firing.
And just to explain, we should explain the difference between a broadside, and a salvo.
That is worth explaining, isn't it? So a broadside's all guns all at once. All four.
They're all pointing in the same direction, And say you've got 12 guns, 6-inch guns or whatever you've got. They're all firing as one. A salvo is when they're firing independently. So you might be boom, 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 boom.
Rather than brum. Blam. Fraser orders McCoy to turn the convoy on a northerly course to get out of the way, basically. Clear the battle area, which he does. 3 cruisers of Force One also they alter course. Norfolk opens fire and then drops back. Belfast. It's interesting though. They claim hits on the Scharnhorst from this first salvo, which I think that's incredible in itself, isn't it?
It absolutely does hit it.
Yeah, but it's radar gunnery. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? The radar gunnery is this good at this point in the war. So they hit her in 3 places, don't they? Port high-angle director abreast the bridge, controlling the forward portside guns.
So that's really bad news because that means the bridge is within spitting distance. I mean, if you're the commander and the key personnel on top of the bridge and you see that come in, that's really not great.
Yeah. Then one goes through the forecastle deck, finishing the crew's quarters, and a third shell lands.
You imagine what that. That's killing a number of people just like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the third shell lands between the third 150mm turret on the port side of the torpedo tubes. So, I mean, they're being roughed. They're being roughed up immediately. People are dying on the Scharnhorst already. 0935, McCoy asks Burnett if he needs any destroyer help. So McCoy wants to get involved, doesn't he? So then Fraser says, actually, yes, send 4 destroyers. Burnett is unaware of this and asks McCoy for 6 destroyers. So Burnett's feeling a little bit more confident than Fraser, arguably, at this precise moment, isn't he? Saying, yeah, send them over, it'll be fine. Send the destroyers over, it'll be fine.
But it goes back to your mission command point from the first episode that again, because of this waiting between deciphering of signals, you're in the middle of an action. You just got to make decisions.
You got to make decisions, and you got to
no time. They're not at home to Mr. and Mrs. Faff.
And commit to them is the other thing,
exactly.
Rather than dawdle. And what Bay's been doing is dawdling and not committing. Is the
and he wants out. He wants to get out of there as quickly as possible now. At this point.
Retires. So at the 0938, having been hit by 3 shells, alters course to 150 degrees, which is southeast, but backwards. Works up to 30 knots, so he's very much determined to get out of there. Yeah. Norfolk ceases fire. The destroyers pick up a U-boat Huff-Duff signal, so they run another sweep. The Scharnhorst is getting out of there, and Bay signals to Dönitz that he's being engaged by a cruiser force using radar detected gunnery, so he knows what he's up against. But they give chase. So, I mean, it's all very well him trying to get out of here now. It's too late. But Bay is trying to attack the convoy rather than the cruiser force.
So what he's planning is a massive, he's going to the southeast and he's going to do a big sweep round and go around the back of them and up north and try and get the convoy. That's his plan.
Which isn't going to, as we'll see, is it going to work out for him, is it?
He could have just kept going southeast and headed back to Altenfjord and they would have lived to see another day.
We're outgunned. Like you said, boss, we were outgunned and I've used my discretion. Discretion is the better part of valor and all that. And then he'd have been, Scharnhorst would have been in dry dock for a bit or whatever. And 617 Squadron would have sunk it later. Anyway, that's not the point. The destroyers are ordered onto the convoy. The Luftwaffe have a look. But Force One then has to decide what to do because the Scharnhorst's leaving, basically.
And McCoy sends his 4 destroyers to go and help Force One.
Yeah, they're not going to give up that easily. Is the point, as we know. So the second action at 11:55, Force One are steering at 045 degrees at 18 knots as the convoy.
Well, first of all, just before we get to that, so Fraser's got a big decision to make. Because some of his destroyers are starting to run a bit short of fuel. Do they push on and go for it and try and get the Scharnhorst in case Force One can regain contract, or do you just go back to scupper flow? But Fraser's a fighting admiral.
It's aggression, isn't it? Exactly.
Yeah.
So the second action is a product of that decision, isn't it? It's no, actually, we're gonna stick with it.
Force One is getting close now.
Is getting close again. By about noon, Bay orders the destroyer, his destroyer flotilla, to attack the convoy, and also they're well out of range from him, so they can't help him if he runs into trouble either. So I mean, it's all very.
But the problem is that the destroyers they've gone too far.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not to the east. They're to the west. They're too far to the west.
Yeah. And at 5 past noon, Force One are now nice and close to the convoy. So even if the Scharnhorst's intention is to come round and swing round onto the convoy, they're going to deal with him anyway. So I mean,
yes, because Force One have gone and chased after Scharnhorst, but only for a little bit because the gap is growing. So they think, okay, right, well, let's turn back and protect the convoy and hope that the Scharnhorst comes back for another crack.
For the convoy, yeah.
And
Peter Fleck,
which is exactly what happens.
Peter Fleck has his lunch of a very cold corned beef sandwich and cold tea, or dinner as he calls it.
A sandvike, as I've spelt it.
And he gets news in driblets, as he says. So basically, it's a bit of rumour, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, isn't it? That you know, you're in that
and you can sense that kind of sense of anxiety about, you know, have we missed it? Is that it? Is that the only chance we're going to have? You know, it was all very thrilling firing a few broadsides, but as the moment passed, you know, who knows?
Yeah. Well, and if you're in a turret, you don't know. I mean, I think it's quite interesting that this action's essentially happening in the dark in extremely high seas.
Yes.
No one saw any of this happen, did they? Or very, very few people witnessed this with their eyeballs.
So the 36th Division is now ordered onto the starboard flank of Force One. So that's so that they can concentrate on sinking ships and not have to worry about torpedoes coming from U-boats. That's basically what's going on there. Musketeer is the leading one of these 4 destroyers that have been seconded, and is 1 mile away from the cruisers. And then
the Sheffield picks up radar contact again. So we go into this same process of
and everyone gets excited again.
That's at 12:10, and then at 12:23, and Burnett orders the destroyers to close up. They fire a star shell again, 7.3 miles, so really close. 12:24, the Scharnhorst's in sight, and all 3 cruisers start firing broadsides. Musketeer, the destroyer, opens fire at 7,000 yards. And when you you know, as a reminder of what Scharnhorst is packing in terms of armament. You know, she's got 150mm guns, 12 150mm guns, 9 280. So to come in that close with the destroyer is very gutsy, isn't it?
Yeah, and Virago gets straddled by a return salvo from the Scharnhorst, which causes all sorts of damage. Because I think it's really important for everyone to understand that if a shell goes into the sea and it's kind of sort of 100 yards away, you still get clattered with shrapnel because it hits the sea, it explodes and bits goes everywhere. You know, so you're not safe if it doesn't hit you necessarily.
So the Scharnhorst is returning fire. I mean, that's the thing that is now engaging properly.
But 3 cruisers worth of broadsides from the Sheffield, Belfast, and the Norfolk, and hits are observed.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not unpleasant, certainly. 1 shell from the Scharnhorst hits the Norfolk X-turret, putting that turret out of action. Another shell lands amidships on Norfolk. I mean, if you're the Scharnhorst, you're thinking, well, which one do we shoot at? That's the other thing, isn't it?
Right, of course. Yeah, don't know, because you could. I mean, so what are the gunnery decisions going on the Scharnhorst? Is it a kind of like every man for itself, or is it like, well, we'll do that ship with a broadside, then we'll do the next ship with a broadside? What do you do in that situation when you're faced with that many targets? Which is after all, what's Bay thinking? Is he thinking shoot at everything all at once, or pick them off one by one? A salvo straddles Sheffield as well, and there are shell splinters, and the Sheffield reduces its fire, doesn't it? Due to bad visibility and the difficulty of seeing the target owing to the heavy spray and cordite smoke. So there's smoke, there's confusion. Yep. Once the gunnery starts. There's still a swell, Al. I mean, that's the bottom line. These things are rocking about all over the place and trying to fire. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Musketeer stops firing at 12:36, having fired 52
salvos.
12:40, Sheffield stops firing with the target out of visual range at 11,400 yards. Belfast fires a further broadside from the A and B turrets, and as X and Y couldn't quite bear at this point. A and B turrets then fire a further 8 salvos using visual technique. 12:41, Belfast stops firing. Norfolk gets hit and there's one officer and 6 men killed. And the Type 284 is knocked out. Yeah. But it's up and running again by 12:41. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing.
And fires another 9 broadsides. And all this time, Scharnhorst is repeatedly altering course, jinking around, doing what he can. I mean, as well you might. And then a chase begins, basically. The 36th Division destroyers come up, or rather Force One comes up along 36th Division, and the Scharnhorst is chased away from the convoy from 1 o'clock. The German destroyers are still looking for the convoy, so they just have missed out on all of this completely.
Yes, but this is the moment where Bay thinks, enough is enough. It's time to go home. So all he's interested in now is getting the hell out of there as quickly as possible. Yeah. Because at 14:18, at nearly 20 past 2, he orders a Astoria flotilla to return to base. And then he signals, actually, admittedly, an hour later, that's presumably because he's got his hands full, he signals Gruppe Nord and tells them the Scharnhorst is also heading back to Altenfjord in Norway. So basically what he's at this point trying to do is get the hell out of there. And the key for the battle of that afternoon and evening is whether the Scharnhorst can get out of the fray quick enough before Force 2 and Force 1 are able to sandwich them in the middle.
So Fraser thinks that they'll intercept the Scharnhorst at around 5:15, 17:15. The convoy alters course again. Yeah, he is. Yeah, the convoy alters course again. It's still being shadowed by U-boats, but the convoy is essentially safe, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah. So what's happening? Scharnhorst is heading southeast, and what's happening with Force 2, i.e., Fraser and the Duke of York and the Jamaica, and the S-class destroyers, is that they are now heading almost due east. So they're trying to anticipate where the Scharnhorst will be, so that they can cut in from the flank. That's basically what they're on the Scharnhorst starboard side, so it's right hand side as it's heading southwards back to Altenfjord. So cut in on it, and then Force 1 will be able to come back down from the north. So then that's how the sandwich will happen.
Although there's a fire on Sheffield, so she has to reduce speed.
Because it's not like Scharnhorst hasn't hit anything.
16:17, the Duke of York picks up the Scharnhorst, so it's working. The Duke of York spotted the Scharnhorst at 45,500 yards, and Fleck then at the same time hears on Jamaica. Peter Fleck hears alarm red 65, so it's working. They really are catching them up. I mean, Musketeer's in the thick of it all the time, isn't she? She leads on. They pick up an echo, but it turns out to be one of the merchant vessels. Sheffield, although has a locked, damaged shaft, has managed to fix it, and they're back up to 23 knots. Belfast is ahead. I mean, it's interesting. They are racing each other, aren't they? There is an element that the captains are racing one another in order to be first to close and deliver the blow, aren't they? There's a bit of that going on, isn't there?
But there's absolutely no question. By 20 past 4, they are really, really homing in.
They are really homing in. The Duke of York's closing in on Scharnhorst. By 4:30, they're 16.8 miles away. The destroyers are closing in. 16:33, Jamaica picks up the Scharnhorst on its 273 radar.
27,500 yards, which is about, so what's that? That's about 15 miles, isn't it?
Yeah, so time's running out for the Scharnhorst. 16:38, Fraser orders the Force 2 destroyers to prepare for a torpedo attack. Scharnhorst is 13 miles away from the destroyers, and 19,300 yards to the Duke of York. So 11 miles to the Duke of York and Jamaica. Yeah. So Belfast is ordered to get ready to illuminate Scharnhorst,
which is to the north of Scharnhorst at the moment.
Yeah, the Hyder and the Huron, the destroyers get a fix. Huff Duff fixes on the U-boat, so that's under control.
They're still escorting. Escorting JW-55B.
Yeah. But that demonstrates that they're on it. They're doing their job. They're protecting the convoy. And of course, it's completely dark again by now because it's what is it? It's 4:45. Scharnhorst alters course again to port. Force 2 have altered their course accordingly so that the turrets all have clear arcs to the target. Because if you want to fire a proper broadside, you want your turrets best pointed at the target, don't you, for stable gunnery and all
exactly.
that sort of thing.
But what is absolutely clear by 4:45, by 16:45 on that Boxing Day Sunday is that the Scharnhorst is now trapped. It's now sandwiched between Force 1 and Force 2. So Force 2 is coming from the west, cutting in on it from the southwest, and Force 1 is coming from the north,
coming down from the north.
If you think of Scharnhorst at the centre of the clock, Force 1 is at kind of 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock, and Force 2, Duke of York and Fraser, they're at about 8 o'clock.
Well, exactly.
Maybe more like 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And closing in on the centre, closing in on Scharnhorst.
So at 16:47, Belfast fires star shells don't to illuminate the Scharnhorst. It doesn't work. And then the Duke of York, a minute later, fires a star shell from its 5.25-inch guns, which illuminate the target. And at 1650, the Duke of York opens fire at a range of 12,000 yards at 6.8 miles.
I mean, what an incredibly magnificent sight that must have been. The flashes in the darkness, the mighty battleship rocking with the blast of this broadside. I mean, that is immense. I mean, we were standing outside the Imperial War Museum the other day looking at those 14-inch guns, weren't we? Yeah. I mean, those are big boys. That's what these guys are firing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say what a magnificent
sight. What's on Duke York? Is it 14-inch or 15-inch? I can't remember.
Well, I mean, you say what a magnificent sight there must have been. Not on the Scharnhorst, because they're taken by complete surprise, which I think is absolutely amazing. Are they not?
They have no idea that Force 2 is coming.
But if they're not looking at their radar, are they? I mean, are they not?
No, they're just. It's just not. They haven't picked up on this. This is what's really amazing. Their radar isn't anything like as good as British radar.
Yeah, but still, and isn't able to bring return fire is the point. Alters course to the north. I mean, it's interesting. If you're
heading straight back into Force 1.
Yeah. But if you obey, you might think, oh, maybe we speed up heading. Maybe we speed up.
Just run away.
Run away. And Force 1 alters course. Also, the Duke of York then looks for torpedo tracks, so does a swing to comb the tracks of any torpedoes that may have been fired at us. So no one's getting overexcited here. They're all being they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's at this point. Then Jamaica opens fire
at 13,000 yards, which is about 7 miles, isn't it?
Hits Jamaica, and Peter Fleck says, and he's in his anti-flash gear and his tin hat,
which is where you have this kind of sort of white hood, and you have your helmet on top of your white hood, basically.
Yeah. A wonderful view of anything, though I wasn't quite sure what was gun flash and what was explosion. He notices that the Scharnhorst star shells gave greeny-yellow light, whereas theirs were much pinker and softer. Although the range was about 13,000 yards, we could see a dim shape, which was her. All flashes were a green colour, and hits sort of lingered after the first concussion. You could see them flash from Scharnhorst, and then you had about 20 seconds in which to think, well, where will this little lot land? Perhaps here. God,
amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. But I love that. I love his piece because it is really vivid. It does give you a very clear sense, I think, of what it must have been like. And there's this, you can see this sort of winking of these flashes. You just don't know whether it's going to hit you or not.
Yeah. So the Duke of York's first broadside straddles the Scharnhorst, and they hit turret A, and
puts out of action.
Fire flashes back into turret B. So A turret's out of action on the Scharnhorst.
B turret's not looking great.
Shells land on the quarterdeck near C turret. I mean, it's Scharnhorst is still returning fire though. She's not just
yes, but A turret is completely out. B turret is out temporarily.
So Scharnhorst fires at Savage, and then Force 1 start up again with another broadside at 1657. Belfast then manoeuvres to fire torpedoes. Belfast is joined by Norfolk. The Scharnhorst suddenly turns on a easterly course. I mean, he
just doesn't know where to go. It doesn't know where to go. There's major panic. And basically what's happening is the Scharnhorst suddenly realises they're surrounded by a lot more firepower than they can possibly return. And it knows it's trapped. I mean, it is like the big bear that's been kind of cornered. It's hard to put into words how panicked you would be, the Scharnhorst, because you know that you're absolutely stuffed.
Which means why at 1725, and this sort of drama continues, but at 1725, Bay signals to Dönitz that he is surrounded. So the penny...
And he effectively is.
And he is. The penny is finally dropped. I mean, he can still steam on, he can still change course, and he's still capable of 30 knots, but he is surrounded. So having let Dönitz know that, the minute later, Fraser orders Force 1 to join Force 2, so they're all going to gang up on him and on Bay and finish him. And then
the Duke of York and Jamaica are still firing broadsides at this point. At 17:30, at 5:30.
Yeah. There's a chase with gunfire. So the Scharnhorst is damaged by this firing from Jamaica and the Duke of York. B turret is knocked out. 14-inch shell goes into the boiler room at 20 past 6, just above the waterline. So they're trying to fix stuff, but are no longer able to fire.
Yeah, and the problem is, of course, this is going to start to affect the speed of the Scharnhorst.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the one thing it's got above everything else is speed. Once it hasn't got speed, it is absolutely trapped.
It's trapped, done for. And Fleck sees the Duke. I mean, she's still, but the Scharnhorst is still firing. Fleck sees the Duke of York get hit amidships. And as she was firing at the same time, there was a terrific explosion, a sort of reddish flame speckled black and tons of smoke. It gave me quite a nasty turn. At 1824, the Duke of York ceases firing after firing 52 broadsides.
52 broadsides. I mean, can you imagine?
The heavy metal of that.
Oh, just incredible. And on Jamaica, the first lieutenant gives updates over the tannoy.
Yeah.
And I like this little bit. So Peter Fleck says he always started Boxing Day bulletin and so on. And when everyone was very excited, you could hear him with the bosun's mate as to which the next number was. Hear him arguing, with the bosun's mate as to which the next number was. We had 2 whacking great battle ensigns up, one forward and one aft. It was a wonderful sight and gave me a big kick to see them flying. But the forward one was shot away and draped itself around the forward funnel quite early on.
It's really, really brilliant account, isn't it?
Incredibly amazing.
The destroyers go in from kind of 6:30.
So it's now 6:30. Yeah.
Savage and Samares go in to attack the Scharnhorst from the west. So the Scharnhorst turns south.
So these are the 4 S-class destroyers, which are a part of Force 2, so supporting Jamaica and the Duke of York. And the idea is to send one to attack from the port side of Scharnhorst and another on the starboard side of Scharnhorst, so that one attacks, gets the, if they do get seen, they attract the attention of the Scharnhorst on the north, on one side, while the other 2 creep around the next.
Yeah, and they fire full salvos of 8 torpedoes. So
yeah, many of which hit.
Many of which hit, and the Scharnhorst tries to return fire. These torpedoes strike the Scharnhorst, and then the Samaras and Savage are hit as well by the return fire, aren't they? So it's going back and forth. But the point is the Scharnhorst is unable to steam on as a result.
It's getting absolutely hammered. 1855, Savage fires full range of torpedoes from 3,500 yards, which is literally nothing. I mean, that's like 2 miles.
2 miles away.
Less than 2 miles.
Yeah.
Which is point blank range, on this class of
effectively,
vessel.
Yeah.
Saumarez only 4 at a range of 1,800 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, that is literally a mile, isn't it? What's a mile? 1,734 or something.
I mean, if you can get in that close, that's a sign that the Scharnhorst has had it, though, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And this was because several shells hit the Saumarez but didn't explode, while others landed in the sea. Splinters decimated the torpedo men on the deck. Hull punctured in 7 places, but all above the waterline. But the torpedo strikes on the Scharnhorst are as follows. 1 from the Scorpion hit just forward of the bridge on the starboard side. 3 torpedoes from the Saumarez and Savage hit the port side. So this is this idea that you're attacking them from both sides with devastating effect. 1 explodes alongside a boiler room, another hits the vessel aft, flooding a number of compartments, and a third hits her on the bows. So he's no longer it can, this is massively reducing its speed to about 20 knots, something like that, which means it's stuffed.
And Peter Fleck is watching this. He said you could see a few tiny fires in Scharnhorst now, but soon red tracer appeared from everywhere in a very low parabola, just pumped and pumped endlessly into her. These came from all over the place, all coming to a combined target. It was a wonderful sight. I mean, in a way,
you can imagine, because you've now got destroyers here. You've got you've got 4 cruisers. You've got Jamaica, and the Duke of York, which is obviously Duke of York being a battleship. Then you've got the 3 cruisers, Belfast, Norfolk, and Sheffield. Then you've got 8 destroyers now, because you've got the 4 which are which have reached from, which were detached from the convoy, and you've got the 4 destroyers that were with Force 2, the S-class destroyers. So they also have anti-aircraft guns, these Ehrlichons and so on, and they're just absolutely just firing and firing and firing. So it's torpedoes, heavy guns, small guns, all homing in on this crippled vessel, this mighty beast, which is...
It's interesting, isn't it, though? Because the Scharnhorst is finished by now. You could stop now, couldn't you?
No, you've got to sit at home.
Well, no, but you could stop and you could take Bay prisoner and you could, all that's, you know what I mean? Stop it. He's dead already. Anyway, the Duke of York then opens fire again at 1 minute past 7, 1901. Meanwhile, on the Scharnhorst, Bay is ordering the remaining ammo from A and B turrets to serve in C turrets. So that's how bad things are for him on the Scharnhorst. I think it's absolutely fascinating that we know as much detail as what's happening on the Scharnhorst in terms of where the damage is and all that sort of thing. thing.
Yes,
Given
absolutely.
the number of
There were survivors, and they kept very detailed accounts, and there is actually a very detailed account done from the German perspective of all of this. Jamaica gets lit up by one of their own star shells, and Peter Fleck says, the thing about star shell is that you feel so terribly naked, as though everyone can see you exactly. Their close range were firing at us, and all the tracer was going straight at us and then over. We could see it all coming. The ratings working radar could see our shells going out, and they're coming in on the screens. I mean, imagine that. Then when the near misses came, you heard a sort of a whoosh, crump, crump in very quick succession. And then you could see it hit the water sometimes, and the spray came and tinkled your hat.
At 1907, Force 1 moves in so it can fire without risk of overshooting and hitting Force 2 and vice versa. Yep. Scharnhorst is down to 10 knots. And then at 1911, finally, Bay receives a signal from Dönitz. Promising destroyers and U-boats.
I mean, yeah, thanks, boss.
Thanks, boss.
Cheers for that. Cheers for that.
Honestly.
Can you believe
that
it?
Beggars belief, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Really?
Just.
Why didn't you disengage or any of the chance, you fool? There's not that.
Yeah.
Belfast then gets stuck in, with guns and torpedoes. Yeah.
1715, Scharnhorst sea turret stops firing.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's still left is one or two 150mm guns. That's it at that point.
And at 1925, Peter Fleck says, then we started our show. There was a Boxing Day bulletin number 32, and the first lieutenant called out in a very excited voice, C&C to Jamaica, go in and finish her with torpedoes. Everyone started shouting and cheering. We went to 3,500 yards, less than 2 miles, firing our 6-inch all the time. It's the ruthlessness in just. This is a crippled vessel. The ruthlessness in then going in and destroying it. Obviously, I know why they're doing it, and I get it. And I've been flipped really earlier by sort of saying, why not stop? Because you've got to send a thing like this to the bottom, haven't you? Really?
Yeah, you got to. Yeah.
They fire having fired 22 broadsides, then fired 2 torpedoes.
We don't just do the rest of the Peter Fleck.
All right, okay. Go on then.
Well, the blast when our guns went off was terrific. My tin hat went off several times. You could see the base of the shells, little red lights, coming together in a little cluster and watching them going over till they started down. And I wondered what poor bastard was going to get it that time. We were hitting continuously, and the Scharnhorst was afire. There was a big red glow, and through glasses you could actually see quite a bit. Yeah.
So they fired, like I say, 22 broadsides, 2 rounds of torpedoes.
Yep.
No hits to the torpedoes. How close are they? And they're not. They're missing. And they fire 36 6-inch rounds. Well, it's the conditions. The Scharnhorst replies with all the remaining arms, but the shooting's all over the place. Belfast fires 3 torpedoes. The Duke of York stops firing, and at 7:30, 1930, the Scharnhorst is listing very badly to starboard. Finally, and Captain Hintzer orders his crew to abandon ship.
Yep.
Opportune fires 4 Opportune fires 4 torpedoes. There's an aptly named ship. The Scharnhorst's going down, and Opportune takes its moment to fire 4 torpedoes. Musketeer's only 1,000 yards away. Fires 4 more.
Fires another 4.
Hits it 3 times.
Yeah.
Opportune fires again. Virago fires 7, claiming 2 hits. And at 1936, Scharnhorst ceases firing.
Jamaica fires 2 more torpedoes in 1937.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
And then there's this huge explosion at 1945, and that's it.
When the magazine goes up.
That's the magazine blowing up, and the whole ship just goes down, and it just vanishes. It just vanishes. Scorpion picks up 30 crew, Matchless picks up 6, 36. That's it. That's all who picked up. Peter Fleck says, I must say I was sorry for them. No one could have lived more than half an hour in that at the outside in that water. The whole ship must have been a raging furnace at the end, and yet they were still firing. They fought wonderfully. There wasn't a sign of running once the battle really started. They just bloody well fought and fought. So there's absolutely amazing kind of respect from the British point of view.
Fraser says, and this is a battle in which the Germans have lost 1,932 men killed, 36 captured. The Royal Navy loses 21 men and 11 wounded. Gentlemen, the battle against the Scharnhorst has ended in victory for us. I hope that any of you who are ever called upon to lead a ship into action against an opponent many times superior will command your ship as gallantly as the Scharnhorst was commanded today. So he's saying these lads went down fighting. God bless them. in the tradition, boldest traditions of all the navies of the world, but we won because they bit off more than they could chew.
Which they absolutely did. I mean, it must have been the most amazing thing to witness that, to see the end. You could sense that everyone's at a fever pitch. All the British people are on Boxing Day, as they know that they've got a golden opportunity to sink a ship that has been the thorn in the side of the British home fleet since the start of the war. Well, that has caused all sorts of trouble, which, let's not forget, it has sunk an aircraft carrier and a cruiser itself. The Channel Dash, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the national humiliation of the Channel Dash.
Humiliation. And so they've scented blood, and they've got it. They found it. They've managed to corner it. And the final kind of end as this huge beast is just completely outfoxed. It's outgunned. It's out intelligenced. It's outfought by superior gunnery from the Royal Navy. Better technology, better skill, better seamanship. It doesn't have a chance really once it's got caught in that pincer. And the clinical way with which the Royal Navy home in absolutely fearlessly themselves, it has to be said, particularly from the point of view of the destroyers, and finish it off is just amazing. But what's also amazing is just how many hits it takes to sink one of these beasts. I mean,
yeah.
It's a big thing. And anyone who was witness to that, it would be an event that you just simply would never be able to erase from your brain, your memory. Yeah. It would have been the most extraordinary sight, smells, sounds.
The noise of that gunner. If you're one of those ships firing a broadside, that's surely a sound you never forget in your life.
And of course, what it means is that the Arctic convoys now have a free passage, effectively. The threat to any further Arctic convoys is kind of over. So it is a big game changer, and it comes at the end of 1943, which has been a terrible year for the Germans, but has ended for the Allies in not such a great shape either, with the kind of stagnation in Italy and things not all going 100% according to plan. So it's a big victory, and needless to say, it's front page of all the newspapers the next day or 2 days later or whatever. But the amazing thing, as Peter Fleck said when that quote right at the beginning is it's like, okay, well, we've done it then, right, on we go. The forces disperse, they go to back to Scapa or back onto the Kola Inlet or whatever. And I mean, the final thing to say about it is that JW55B does get to Russia successfully without a single loss. It is the final nail in the coffin, I would say, of the Kriegsmarine as a potential threat to the Allies.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Yes. Yeah, but don't worry, Dönitz has sent some destroyers and some U-boats, Jim.
yeah, thank goodness. And he's still going to be in charge, and he's going to take over his Führer. So he's going to take
over his Führer. So yes, everything's all right. Everything's all right for him. Right. Yeah. Anyway. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Scharnhorst has gone to the bottom. Well, thank you very much for listening. 2024 is before us, so 1944.
That's it. We're done with 43 now.
A ton of stuff to do. Loads of things to cover. Very exciting. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, we have Ways Fest, of course, in July at Black Pit Brewery. That's wehavewaysfest.com. I think it's the website. I can never remember. Look it up. You intelligent people. We'll see you all very soon. Cheerio.
Cheerio.